everybody. I'm Roy Ice, the new speaker director for Faith for Today, and thank you so much for joining me. We're going to have a great time in this seminar talking about reaching the unchurched. That's a really big topic. It's something I've wrestled with myself. I've been a pastor in local churches. I started ministry 28 years ago, and so I know exactly what many of you are going through in saying, I really want to feel like I'm achieving what I'm called to do in the place where God has called me to be. So we're going to have a whole lot of fun. I can't wait for the Q&A session that's going to come right at the end of this, about a half an hour presentation. I'm just going to give you a couple of things to think about, maybe some things that we can talk about. I look forward to interacting with you, looking forward to making friends with you and getting to know you as well. So thank you so much for spending some time with me. I'll try my best to make it worth your time. Now, whenever we're looking at reaching the unchurched, I know a lot of times I myself have gone to one of the greatest quotes ever written about how Christ himself stretched and reached into people groups and then bade people to follow him. And so we can't help but think about Ministry of Healing, page 143. And I'm going to put it up here on the screen for us. This is a new version. Perhaps you've never seen this version before. This is from the New Practical Application Version, Pew Press 2019, in which this version reads, Christ's method alone will give true success in reaching the people. The Savior created one subcommittee from his disciples to deal with matters of creative evangelism and another to decrypt the mysteries and methods of determining whether the stranger who just dropped by the church really needs help or is just scamming us for some quick cash. Christ lovingly modeled for his flock that at least one annual, multi-week, 27-night effort focusing on how we know prophecy better than the church they currently attend, and all this presented by a guy your neighbors have never heard of, but trust you me, he is a world-renowned expert in the field. Yes, this method alone will give true success in reaching the people. In this way, he changed those who followed him. He showed his sympathy for them, ministered to their needs, and won their confidence. Then he bade them, follow me. Now, honestly, that whole first part, some earlier manuscripts read, mingled with men as one who desired their good, instead of all of that other stuff. And the funny thing is, we spent a whole lot of time trying to reach out to the unchurched by doing all this other stuff. And I want to present some things to you today that I hope will help you rethink how we are reaching the unchurched, because the fact is, we have a mingling problem. We don't mingle very well. In fact, I was meeting with a pastor about a year or so ago, and I was having a seminar, one very similar to this, talking about how we can reach people in different groups and different angles of ministry. And he said he had a huge fear. He said his fear was that he knew last Wednesday when he came into prayer meeting that because he smelled like cigarette smoke, the majority of his church members would assume that he was struggling with smoking instead of assuming that he was mingling with a smoker and giving him Bible studies just before prayer meeting. And I responded to him, unless you smell like the people that you were witnessing to, you're not mingling with men as one who desires their good. And so I want to spend some time with you today talking about how do we mingle and what is the best method to reach unchurched people so that we can truly give them the best news in the universe. And so one of the things I want us to look at today, first of all, is some statistics. Now, back in 2017, 2018, I started going to some North American division gatherings called the E-Huddle. The E stands for evangelism. And as I went there, I started seeing some very interesting statistics. Because at that time, our executive secretary, who of course now is our president, Elder G. Alex Bryant, he presented statistics to us regarding what happened to people who left the church within an 8-year period. They did a very in-depth study, surveyed a whole bunch of people, and in the last 8 years, they discovered a very shocking number. First of all, we've lost 33.4% of members during that block of time. Over 1/3 of our members during that block of time. This is really a serious topic when you look at, okay, we want to reach the unchurched. Well, what about those we've reached and now they've unchurched themselves? So what's happening from the moment we reach the unchurched, bring them in and say, stay with us, and ultimately they're not staying with us? We found out in that study, and perhaps you can connect with the secretary and ask them for the statistics. They are very, very interesting statistics. But we found in that study that members are not leaving the church because of a conflict with our beliefs. Why are they leaving? Well, take a look at this pie chart. This was a photo I took from the e-huddle back in 2018, and it shows that only 9% of the people that left the church that were surveyed during that block of time, only 9% of those former members were opposed or hostile to their former church. Look at the rest. 17% left, they just didn't care. 18% was kind of bittersweet. 56% said they were happy memories, but it just wasn't for them anymore. And what we discovered in asking them more and more questions about why did you leave the church, we discovered that 91% have in some way been led into a state of apathy by our church, not motivated to love it or hate it. And the question is, well, why would that be? Well, we saw from ultimately the reasons why they decided to stop attending the church is these members are not leaving because they have a conflict with our beliefs. Our beliefs are strong. We spend the vast majority of our time in our evangelistic efforts trying to prove how our theology is stronger than the church across the street. And that's why you need to come to our church. That's why you need to get baptized in our church, because our doctrine, our beliefs are strong enough to convince you to come be part of our people movement. The problem is 91% of the people are saying, that's great. I'm glad you have your beliefs, and they're great. I can hang on to those beliefs. The problem is, I don't have any friends. The majority of the people left because of a lack of meaningful connection with the church and its members. Now, I don't know what that does to you, but that really stabs at my heart, because as I'm looking at reaching the unchurched, I have to ask the question, so what am I bringing them into? And if I know that 91% of the people I'm bringing into my church are going to leave within 18 months because they have no friends, there's obviously a huge hole in the bucket. We work like mad to spend money and time and energy on these evangelism campaigns to reach the unchurched, to bring them in, to say, welcome to this new family of faith. But there's a huge hole in that bucket. And within 18 months, the level that we had risen to by this evangelistic campaign quickly goes down to where we were before, because there's a hole in the bucket, and that hole needs to completely be corked off and kept from us having this loss in the way it is. Our challenge is our church members need to feel cared for, and ultimately they need to understand, what is it that they're joining? Are they simply joining a group of people who are fairly arrogant because we know theology, prophecy, we have our own prophet, we go to church on the right day, we understand certain points like the state of the dead, we have a more biblically sound understanding of what Scripture really says? Is that who we are? Or are we a community of faith that really enacts the character of God in helping people to understand the world will know that we are Christ's disciples if we love one another? I want to share two things with you before we go into Q&A time, and I'm hoping these will be great little launching points for us to have conversation here in just a few moments. But one of the first things that I want to share with you is really the marketing strategy. So we're going to look kind of theoretical for a moment, and then I want to look theological. I think we need to always take our theory and match it up with theology and ask the question, does this truly fit what Christ himself would do? Is this Christ's method in reaching the unchurched? And if we can say yes to that, then our theory can stand and we can hang on to the theory. But I want to show you some basics of how people are understanding in modern times, especially in the Western mindset, how people are understanding how you evangelize or market the church in a way that people truly not only want to become part of your movement, but want to help to replicate their experience into the lives of their friends, family, and loved ones. And so I want you to take a look for a moment here at something that we at Faith for Today call the Evangelism Funnel. Now, in the rest of the world, they might call it the marketing funnel because they're only dealing with 3 levels. The first level that most companies, most corporations deal with is called top of the funnel. We call this TOFU for short, top of the funnel, TOFU. And a lot of Adventist evangelistic efforts actually fit very well in the tofu level, not simply because as Adventists we have tofu burgers, tofu hot dogs, and tofu just about everything else, but because a lot of our ministries deal with people in this level. And I'm going to talk to you about that in just a moment. The second level of the marketing funnel is MOFU. It's the middle of the funnel. And the bottom level, of course, is called BOFU, the bottom of the funnel. And in each 3 of these levels, there is a certain person that is in that level based on where they are in the decision-making process. So, of course, in TOFU, you have people in the attraction stage. What this means is they're definitely feeling that they have a need, but they're not really sure. Right when they're at the top rim of TOFU, they're not really sure if there is anyone out there, whether an organization, a company, a business, a product manufacturer, who has actually come up with a solution to their problem. And so they're attracted because they have a felt need, they have an issue, they know there's something within them that they truly want to have resolved. And so they're attracted to find, is there anybody out there that's come up with a solution? And so as they're going through this process, what they realize is, oh, there are some individuals, there are some companies, there are some churches, there are some manufacturers who have come up with a possible solution to my problem, to my issue, to my felt need. And so they go through the middle of the funnel stage of decision making by evaluating. And they start comparing. How does this match up to some of the other solutions that I see? And then ultimately, as they go through the evaluation process, they try some things out, they process in their mind what might be the best solution for their specific need. Then they get into the decision segment, the decision area of the marketing or evangelism funnel. And this is where they decide, this is the product, this is the solution, this is the church that I'm going to be part of because it answers more than any other possible solution. It answers my felt need and my problem. And so they decide on a brand, and this is where brand loyalty comes in, and they decide this is what I'm going to consistently buy, or in church, this is a church I'm going to consistently go. But in church, and especially at Faith for Today, the media ministry, and all of our ministries, when it deals with evangelism, there's actually 2 other stages that are very vital in this evangelism funnel. And the first one, of course, is GoFu. These are the generators of the funnel. This is the multiplication stage. These are our disciples. This is what discipleship ministry is all about. Because once you take someone through attraction and then evaluation and decision, now they've come to a place, they've decided to follow Jesus, they're ready to give him their life, and now it's time to do what Christ asked, go into all the world. And so GoFu is all about, okay, so who do you know that is not at the top of the funnel that we can connect with in a relational way to help them go through this process? And that brings up this very nebulous, cloudy foggy area of a tunnel that's non-solid. That's why it looks the way it does on your screen. It's not really a solid level of the funnel, because this is a level of people who are in the distraction stage. They have zero felt need for church. They have zero felt need for God. They have zero felt need to get themselves strapped down to a list of rules and regulations in order to be part of your church movement. So, ultimately, how do you reach the unchurched who are in the UFU, outside of the funnel? Because that's really the question that we're going to try to answer today in the seminar and in the Q&A time. So the question is, how do you reach people in the distraction phase? And the challenge is, we've tried a whole bunch of different things, and things do work for a certain amount of time, but we're finding as we're surveying more and more people that some of the methods that we used to use in the past definitely do not work today, at least in the Western world, in reaching people and having them come check out what is our church all about and what is God all about to them. And so one of the best ways to get people who are outside the funnel, this is the unchurched people, is actually to take those who are in the GoFu section, those who are excited, those who are passionate, those who say, this worked for me, and ask, but who do you know? Who do you know personally that is distracted? Who do you know personally that has no attraction to church right now? Who is it that you know that you would like to help them have the same experience you had, starting at the top of the funnel and helping them experience through our family of faith? What does it mean to have a personal relationship with the God of the universe, the God who saved you, the God who loves you, the God who cannot wait to see you face to face and dwell with you? How do we get there? Now, at Faith for Today, we can't just have models and not use them. So what we had to do is ask, in our programming, what have we done to make sure that we're meeting every single stage and hand-holding people from stage to stage so that we're helping people in the local congregation, in your church, to have that experience. And so what we've done, as you can see here, is all of our major resources and major programming we put on the funnel to say, how are we helping the local church have the resources that they need, that the relationships that are being gained out in the world are handheld into a local church experience. And you'll even notice there's something there at the top, new series. We have to stretch and reach outside of our comfort zone and even do more programming that reaches out to bring people to you. And I'm going to talk to you about some of those at the end. One of them being Indestructible, and another a brand new program that we hope to have out here in the next 1.5 to 2 years. It takes that long to create a new series and get it out there and get it on the real networks that are out there. And so that's how we personally are working on that ourselves. Now, one of the things that we've learned through best practices is that like I said before, that if we keep doing the same practices that we've done in the past, chances are we're not going to have really good results. I want you to see something here from the book Churchless. It says, impersonal media efforts are almost guaranteed to be ignored. No skeptics we interviewed said they were much more likely to consider attending a church if they received a direct mail solicitation or had exposure to advertising about a nearby church via television, radio, newspapers, or billboards. And once again, this is from the 2014 publication of Churchless, Understanding Today's Unchurched and How to Connect with Them. Now, one of the things that I want you to understand is that what we are learning through statistical evidence like this and through very, very real empirical evidence of what is effective today is that we have shifted from a presentation model to a relationship model. Now, I promised you at the beginning that we wouldn't just look at the theory, and so I want to shift us into the theology, because I think it's really interesting when you take a step back and ask a question, how did Jesus himself connect with the unchurched? because Jesus had relationships with the unchurched, not just simply people that he healed and sent them on their way, but he had relationship with unchurched people on his staff. Because when you look at the 12 disciples, they were not only diverse in their ages and diverse in their occupations, but they were diverse in their religious practice. Because at least one of Jesus' 12 disciples was unchurched. He was not allowed to go to church. Why? Because he was a tax collector, the ultimate traitor at the time of Jesus. He was a Jew who decided to give it all away. And I want us to spend a moment here, and I want you just to sit back, and I want you to picture, I'm going to help you paint a picture of how Jesus connected with the unchurched. So listen to this. Think about Levi. Levi had given up on the church years ago. He said goodbye to the hypocrites, to the hopelessness caused by the Messiah's absence, to the hype of being a special people in a world that says you're not. It just wasn't for him. His parents insisted that Christ was coming soon, but Levi couldn't help but chuckle. The world had said soon for countless generations, and where was this God now? He was obviously tucked away somewhere in heaven, doing God knows what, if he even existed at all. So with no proof to the contrary, Levi decided to live a more logical and productive lifestyle. He was smart enough and hardworking enough to create his own version of heaven on earth. It was painful to see the look in his parents' eyes, but he had to pursue his dreams. Gifted with the keen ability to read people and a knack at remembering the smallest details, he easily passed through the interview process and retained his desired job. Rome paid pretty well, and now he called them boss. They called him a tax collector. He was on his way to acquiring the wealth he had always imagined. Now, at the beginning of each month, Rome required Levi to pay them up front for the estimated taxes that should be collected. He then spent the remainder of the month collecting at least that amount from all of the traders importing and exporting their goods and animals. If he was shrewd enough or tricky enough, he could make quite a bit more than Rome's estimate. This money he could keep for himself. This kept his eyes and ears sharp for any unique news in the vicinity of his tax booth in Capernaum. Recently, there had in fact been several extraordinary reports. Many people, as they bustled past his booth, described a mysterious man in magical terms. Jews talked about him. Gentiles were perplexed by him as well. Word on the street had it that this enigmatic man named Jesus was going to speak to his growing fan base on the Mount. Levi had to know the truth about this Jesus fellow. Did this man truly laugh in the face of danger as he reached out and touched a contagious leper? And how was it that Jesus' touch could blast away any trace of gray-green decay and replace a leper's ears, nose, and fingertips to their natural golden brown tone right before your eyes? Were the reports exaggerated when they claimed that Jesus had healed scores of people by calmly stating simple commands? Did he have that kind of power and authority over the demons? Did the wind and the waves actually obey him? And most importantly, to Levi personally, did this Jesus really treat a Roman officer with compassion and heal his young servant? Levi closed up shop and followed the crowd to the Mount to hear Jesus preach. What he heard was unlike any sermon he had ever heard as a child in the temple. This guy used humor and sarcasm. He spoke with authority instead of simply quoting authorities like the other rabbis. With sharp wit and bold clarity, he spoke of revolutionizing the church by asking this one question over and over with different scenarios. Is your religion making you more loving or more of a legalist? Right in front of the Pharisees and teachers of the law, Jesus said that there is a righteousness that surpasses even theirs. And the biggest kick in the seat of the pants came when Jesus said that these lifelong, dedicated law protectors would not be going to heaven. The look on their faces. Levi would never forget that. It reminded him of how his own face burned red hot every time they hurled insults at him for selling out to the Romans. He returned to his tax booth later that day, unable to shake the revolutionary words of Christ. Was it possible that the church could change? Was there a group rising up who would focus more on God's beautiful mission than on man's behavioral modification? Everyone hated Levi because he was a Roman sympathizer. Might this Jesus have sympathy? Might this Jesus have sympathy on him like he did for the Roman officer? Might the church find its relevance once more in his heart? Could there be a new way that works and makes sense to common people? Should he give God one more chance? It was at this moment that Levi looked up from his tax booth and his eyes locked onto the gaze of the approaching Jesus. The eyes of this rabbi were full of compassion and love. No one had looked at Levi with compassion or love for years. The Jews glared at him with contempt, earned by being a traitor. And the Romans looked down their noses at him with the condescension of slave masters. Nobody ever looked at him with compassion. Nobody. Ever. But here he stood before Levi's tax booth, the magic man, all smiles and warmth. I have a request, Jesus said. I'm putting together a group of disciples, and I'd like for you to join us. Levi was speechless. No self-respecting rabbi had ever or would ever stoop to this shameful level of asking a student to follow him. No, a disciple always had to submit an application and wait for an agonizingly long time to hear whether they had been accepted or not. What was the catch? Where was the punchline? Where were the hidden cameras? But Jesus just smiled, laugh lines curving the corners of his eyes as he said, Matthew, follow me and be my disciple. Levi sat there, stunned. In a fraction of a second, several thoughts flooded through his mind. Did Jesus just call him Matthew? Did he just honor him with a new name? How did Jesus know? How could he know how much Levi cringed every time people spoke his name? Levi, a name which meant joined in harmony with God. It was worse than a bad joke. The moment he had decided to become disjoined from the church, he also chose to stop singing in harmony with God. To be quite frank, he always felt like he was singing a solo anyway. Every time someone said his name, it was a reminder of what a failure his spiritual life had become. And now, here, Jesus stood saying, I want to offer you a new start with a new name. I want to call you Matthew, which means God's gift. The tax collector tried to let the significance of Jesus' words sink in. God's gift? Love, acceptance, compassion, friendship, forgiveness, belonging, purpose, direction, and salvation. These and many more were all of the things being offered as God's gift to this detached church member. Could he start again? Might this be the secret to finding the inner peace that his wealth could never afford? This could be it. With the help of this man of God, he could go on a quest to build a faith that finally made sense. Without a second thought, he closed his books, closed his shop, and ultimately closed that very dark chapter in his life. Love and compassion did something to him that liturgy and commandments never could. It broke through to the deepest compartments in his heart. Matthew, now filled with the excitement of exchanging his occupation of collecting taxes to a vocation of collecting souls, does what the rest of the world would do. He throws a party, and he invites all of his friends. It's a new birthday party, celebrating his new birth. Who does he invite? The only ones who will still have anything to do with him. His coworkers, the con artist, and all of their drinking buddies. Of course, Jesus and his first 4 disciples, James, John, Andrew, and Peter, show up to the party as well. They're the honored guest. One of the sharpest criticisms that was flung at Jesus from the Jewish leadership was that he spent way too much time with unchurched sinners. It would have been more palatable had he simply preached to them in some outdoor mixed setting, but instead he went to parties with them, not just Matthew's, but several others. He earned a false reputation of being a drunk because he spent time at these secular feasts. He sat with unchurched people, laughed with them, touched their shoulders, touched their furniture, touched their dinnerware, and even ate their food. This may seem fairly petty to us today, but at the time of Christ's ministry, it was unthinkable to do what Jesus was doing. Spiritual uncleanliness was transferable by touch. And this new rabbi not only wallowed in the unclean, his reckless behavior contagiously spread to his growing crowd of groupies. This is how Jesus treated the unchurched. He loved them. He opened up to them. He shared his ministry and his spiritual goals with them. He was comfortable with them, and they with him. Jesus never watered down his faith in order to fit in with the faithless. He simply invited them to come alongside and to witness firsthand what can happen in the presence of God. He never force-fed his beliefs, but instead patiently helped his friends to nibble little by little until their faith became well-nourished. But most importantly, Jesus never let religion get in the way of his relationships. He let his relationships lead people to revolutionary religion. And that is the example he left us to follow. So we have to ask, how is your faith a tangible and beneficial resource to your unchurched friends? Are they surprising you from time to time by asking you to pray for them? Do they ask you questions about your God every now and then? If so, God's Holy Spirit is using your friendships in a powerful way. If not, perhaps now is the time to invest in what you can relationally into your unchurched friends. Are they being consistently reminded by you that they are loved, valued, and important to your life? Are they experiencing from you expressions of love that can only come from a heavenly source? Jesus said, "By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another."